Good evening. Roll call. Councilmember Flynn.
Present.
Councilmember Husty. Absent. Councilmember Walter.
Present.
Vice Mayor Taylor.
Present.
Mayor Haskell.
Here,
You have a quorum.
thank you. There, although it's on the agenda as AB 2449 considerations, there is no one currently planning to attend remotely. So we're going to skip through that and move on to the proclamation. So I'm going to read that for Mental Health Awareness Month. So this is a proclamation designating May 2025 as Mental Health Awareness Month. Whereas mental health and freedom from substance abuse issues is fundamental to the overall health and well-being of all community members in the San Mateo County, regardless of gender, race, ethnicity, sexual orientation, religion, or economic status. And whereas mental health and substance abuse conditions affect 1 in 4 adults in the U.S., estimates suggest that 1 in 4 adults with a mental health condition are not receiving the help they need. And whereas mental health and substance abuse conditions are as treatable as other health conditions, and people who have mental health and substance abuse issues can recover and lead full productive lives. And whereas stigma prevents many from seeking services and support, education, and contact with those sharing stories of hope and recovery are key to reducing this stigma. And whereas San Mateo County Behavioral Health and Recovery Services staff, community partners, and clients, consumers, and family members dedicate themselves to promoting wellness, resilience, recovery, inclusion, and equity around mental health and substance abuse conditions and issues, with numerous clinic locations located throughout San Mateo County. Now, therefore, be it proclaimed that the town of Portola Valley hereby designates the month of May 2025 as Mental Health Awareness Month, and calls upon community members and partners to recommit to reducing stigma and promoting wellness around mental health and substance abuse issues in San Mateo County, dated this 14th of May, 2025.
Thank you.
Okay, next on our agenda is the town manager report. Mark, take it away.
All right, thank you so much, Mayor and Council and public. I have a few things tonight. Item 1, yes, Saturday is the horse fair. We'll be here from 10:30 to 1:30. This is especially good for kids. It's being sponsored by our own Trails and Paths Committee. Be at the town center. There will be carriage rides, the petting zoo, pony rides. We even get a chance to listen to a horse's heartbeat, many other things. So encouraging families to come and enjoy themselves at the horse fair. Secondly, I want to thank our community for responding to the Zoom call related to what are we looking for in the town manager. They also responded to the town halls we had on the expenditures and on revenues. And they also participated in the survey we had regarding what are we looking for at the town hall? A town manager. So thank you so much for that. There have been questions on what happened with our conversations with HCD, housing. We talked about it at the last meeting. We did have that meeting. One result we had was that we sent the ordinances that were approved by council. We asked that they be considered as a possibility for recertification. We've received acknowledgement that those ordinances were received. We haven't received anything else at this point, so we don't know. We also had a good conversation with them about where we think housing can be actually built, where we want housing built, not just rezoned. So these are the alternative sites that we have, the Ford Field. So we're taking Ford Field off because we're not going to build there. Following up with that, we have had some positive contacts with the owner of Village Square, which is one of the sites. We've been in contact with Christ Church. They're working with the designer right now. And after third time's the charm, I now have an appraiser who actually wants to do Fogarty. Now it took us boom, boom, boom to get it, but we do have it. We just need to get a contract with that person. So that's that. You'll hear more about the housing element in the presentation tonight. And on a more somber note, would be I know the community struggled with the search for the hiker. And it was not easy. It was a very complex search. And we have not been successful yet, but there's a lot of outreach. We had some 800 volunteers over time. We also, because of its complexity, we received some remarkable leadership by our sheriff's department and by the park rangers from the Mid-Peninsula Open Space District. I know that Councilmember Hupkey was out there on the horse looking, but I especially want to acknowledge our Vice Mayor, Greg Taylor. Search and rescue is one of his areas of expertise. He was out there 12-hour days throughout the entire time of the intense search. He led at least 3 of those major days, as well as participating in all of them. I know he did not get that much sleep, but his leadership was really important in doing that. He's also been involved in talking with family members. So we should really honor our Craig Taylor, our Vice Mayor. So thank you, Craig.
Thank you, Craig.
That's my report. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Okay, next we'll go to oral communications. These are for items that are not on our agenda, or if people wish to comment on the town manager report, that is also appropriate. I'm looking in the schoolhouse and I am not seeing any hands raised here. I see one hand raised online. So Rita Gomez.
Hi, thank you for taking my comment and really appreciate everyone in the community working at Windy Hill to try and find that hiker. Thank you for bringing that up. But Mr. Town Manager, can you please say what you had said about Ford Field again? Dorothy Ford Park? We didn't hear it. I'm sorry. It was just too low at that point. If you can repeat that, appreciate it. Thank you.
I'll repeat it. So basically that in our meeting with HCD, we explained why Dorothy Ford did not work for us, that we wanted to do more than simply rezone something that may or may not ever get built, and that we have 2 alternatives for sure, maybe 3, that we actually might build some housing rather than continue to talk about. So they were very disposed to that perspective, and that's kind of where we are. We're going to continue to work with them informally to get this over. We've also already working with someone to help us rewrite the language to remove Ford from the rezoning and so on, and to add the ones that we just talked about, which was Village Square, Christ Church, and maybe Fogarty, depending on how the appraisal goes.
And because it might not have come over, can you go over the status of any submission to HCD? Has anything been submitted in
Sure.
writing?
So what we've submitted to HCD at our request and their acknowledgement, they wanted to receive it was what was already passed by council at that meeting. That's the ordinances that were related to what HCD asked us to do. These are rezoning ordinances. They are not any rezoning of Ford Field. They were rezoning ordinances, but it was a specific request in October from HCD. We asked that they consider recertifying our housing element based on those ordinances. I'm not overly confident on that, but it was a request. They agreed to request. They've acknowledged they've received the ordinances. Terrence sent them off to them. So that's where we are with that. We also said we had some properties, that's the ones I mentioned, the Village Square and Christ Church, that we are identifying and focusing on and how that arose out of the committee. And we also discussed Fogarty as a possible site. So we're in the mix, we're in conversation. We'll see how it goes, but hopefully, Rita, did that come through to you this time?
She's
Okay.
offline at this point, but I
Thank you,
assume,
that's- I was loud enough, I think.
yeah.
I have a question.
Well, it's about follow-on from Mark's report.
Yes, and open communication. Is that
Okay.
okay?
Yeah.
Mark, the appraiser for Fogarty, are they also going to be the appraiser for the parking lots, or is that a completely separate thing?
That's separate.
And then I think there was a mention that you're recruiting for a new town clerk. Any
Yes, we are.
update on that yet, or?
Making progress, there should be something emerging relatively soon.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
And then I would like to just to make a statement. A few weeks ago, I finished the required Ethics and Brown Act training that all of us are required to do every 2 years. And there was one section that I was really struck by, and it was the purpose of the open meeting laws and the purpose of town councils, or city councils, but in our case, town councils. So I wanted just to read this short piece that's directly from the training materials, because I feel like as a town council, we really need to take this information to heart. So the purpose of open meeting laws and of councils. Operating under the requirements of open meeting laws can sometimes be frustrating for local officials. Confining discussions among decision makers to public meetings can seem inefficient and an unnatural way to communicate with colleagues. It may be helpful to acknowledge that the goal of open meeting laws is not efficiency. If efficient decision-making were the priority, one wouldn't even need a multi-member decision-making body. Having a multi-member decision-making body suggests a different set of values. This includes the value of having a group of individuals with a variety of experiences, backgrounds, and viewpoints come together to develop a consensus. Consensus is developed through debate, deliberation, and give and take. This process can sometimes take a long time and is very different in character than the individual decision maker model. And that's the statement. And I just wanted to say, and I just wanted to tell everyone so that we're all aware, so all operating on the same information. Town council is a deliberative body. We debate, we discuss ideas and different perspectives. Our purpose is to attempt to respectfully persuade our colleagues to our point of view, also to attempt to represent the different views we hear from the town. We try to bring our different perspectives. This only can happen if we have an extensive deliberation. In other words, a back and forth discussion among ourselves with respect and openness. I encourage my colleagues to take that philosophy to heart as we do the people's work here on the dais. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm looking at public hands. I am not seeing any further hands raised. All right, so let's move on to the consent agenda. And I'm going to see if there are public comments on the consent agenda before I ask my council members whether they wish to pull anything. I'm not seeing any hands raised in the schoolhouse, and I'm not seeing any hands raised online. So circling back to the council, does anyone wish to pull anything from the consent agenda? Mary, Rebecca? No. So the only thing I want to pull are the regular meeting minutes of April 23rd, 2025. And procedurally, the only reason I want to do that is because I'm going to abstain. I was not here. So does that mean I have to pull the whole thing or pull 6A? And we'll just vote on that separately.
Yes, that's correct.
Thanks. Okay. So can I have a motion to approve items 6B, C, and D?
I
So
move to
moved.
approve.
Second.
Me too.
Okay, we don't,
You can ask all in favor.
all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, 6B through D are approved. And then for 6A, does anyone wish to approve?
The volume down, it seems quite loud.
Okay, we'll just have to monitor our own, we'll get reverberates. So can I have a motion to approve 6A? I am going to abstain.
So my meeting minutes actually have 6B as the one that you missed. So I'm sorry, I didn't notice that before.
Sorry?
Was it the special meeting or the regular
It
meeting?
was the regular meeting, April
Which
23rd. I was not here.
6. Oh, I see.
6A.
In the, it's listed in different order. Sorry, ignore that.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, so for this, do we need a roll call since I'm abstaining?
Yes.
Okay, roll call vote.
Councilmember Flynn,
Aye.
Councilmember Hufty,
Aye.
Councilmember Walter,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Taylor,
Aye.
Mayor Haskell.
Abstain.
Motion carries.
Okay. Great. So next, we're moving to the regular agenda. Item 7A is consideration of adopting Resolution 2967-2025, establishing a donation and gift acceptance policy and creating a special revenue fund for undesignated donations. I assume, Tony, are you presenting on this?
I am presenting, but John Golden is here, he will be presenting a partial presentation
Okay.
that's related to this item.
Okay, so you'll both present and then we'll ask questions after both of
Yes.
you have presented.
Yes.
Great. Thank you.
So tonight's item is a resolution establishing a donation and gift acceptance policy and creating a special revenue fund for undesignated donations. My presentation will be brief. On February 12th, 2025, the Town Council reviewed and provided direction on a proposed donation and gift acceptance policy. Discussion included the following: threshold acceptance levels, disposition of surplus funds and return policy, purpose and use of special revenue fund, and town-approved projects. Before you tonight is the proposed donation and gift acceptance policy created after the discussion at that last meeting. And it does have language for disposition of surplus funds and a return policy, purpose and use of the special revenue fund, and town-approved projects. John Golden is here to provide a brief introduction on the Portola Valley Fund, which is a nonprofit that is going to be established to help us with fundraising for some town-approved projects. So, John?
Terrific. Can you bring up my slide, please? Thank you. There we go. Oh, you can do full screen. We can manually do it, I think. Anyway, so, well, he's getting his buttons right. I'm here to sort of publicly indicate that the Portola Valley Fund is ready for activity. I am looking tonight with to get some sort of approval from the town council to move forward with it and work with staff and look for a first project. I've talked with a number of you and staff over roughly the last year to try to get input at what we should do. And I think we've arrived at something that's pretty interesting that will be helpful for the town. And let's go to slide number 2. There we go. So we've got 3 board members. We've got myself, we've got John Richards as our treasurer, and Sarah Dory as our secretary. In the future, if it all goes well, I would like to get potentially another couple of board members from a younger generation. Not that we're old, but but reach different segments of the community. But we needed 3 to start off with, and that's what we have. We are fully set up as a nonprofit, a 501c3. We have a tax ID number all set up. We have the portolavalleyfund.org website set up. So we're in pretty good shape. And in terms of why did we do this? So I've been one of these relatively long-term town members, been a number of fundraising projects over the year, most of which you don't get any tax deduction for. So potentially, and there's been a lot of things that I think we'd like to see. There are, even prior to maybe some budget issues over the last year, there were certainly items that people have wanted to be available to the town that are not in the budget, not possible. But we also have a relatively affluent community that is potentially willing to help. And if we can do that tax deductible, that's even better. We've also noted that people have specific areas of interest. So one of the key things behind Portola Valley Fund is that we do not really stand for anything. We are sort of non-aligned. We're not for this group or that group. We're trying to set up things on a per project basis so that people can choose to support a particular project if they like or don't support it, that type of thing. The only sort of key thing behind all of it is that it has to be town approved. We're not doing anything that doesn't come through the town and has town approval. However, the town would like to do that. I think sometimes it'll be staff approval. Sometimes it may have to come all the way to the town council, and we'll just work with staff to figure that out as we go. I think some of the advantages of the project are basis that we might have projects that, 1 or 2 people say, I'm willing to pay for that. But we also could have ones that are much more widespread that the community can get behind. That might be a bunch of donations. So this is set up so that we can do things en masse as well as on an individual basis if needed. I mentioned that it has to be town approved. And when we put this together, the donations that come in will be targeted for a specific project. What we're looking for here, let's go to the next one. Oh, we got it. There we go. Before something comes to us, we're assuming that there will be a team that has researched it, a volunteer team that has researched the necessary details, engaged with town staff as appropriate, and received any kind of approval that are needed, and that is going to be championing this project. Thoughts behind that is we should be able to find a willing set of volunteers to do that, and if we can't, then it's probably not a good project. But I'm anticipating that will, the team could be a single person. It could even be a single staff member or a single council person. It could also be a group. I do see things like the committees could potentially take advantage of this on particular projects that they're very interested in having. Once it sort of has town approval and we have a goal for it, we'll put it on the website with the fundraising goal and a description of what the project is and kind of the timeline that people can expect. Donations, details will be on the website, obviously. We've got pretty much everything set up from a donation perspective. It can do credit cards, it can do ACHs, Apple Pay will work on it. I've experimented with a DAF, so Fidelity DAF has already worked through it. Other DAFs, I have to wait for the first person to try something. They don't actually let you register ahead of time. And the idea is that once we hit that fundraising goal, that money will be transferred to the town for a specific project. One discussion we did have was that when it came to like return policies and that we would mimic the town so that as we hand it off, we're consistent, if you will, that we don't end up with anything odd going on there. And that is where we are. So questions? Or Tony, do you have anything to add to that? Oh,
I'm gonna pick up. Some specific items in the policy that kind of augment what John had said. The policy does establish criteria for evaluating acceptance of designated donations. One being consideration of an immediate or initial expenditure of town funds is required to accept the donation, the potential and extent of the town's obligation to maintain, match, or supplement the donation or the intended use of the donation. And then the last item is disposition of surplus funds should the total amount of donation exceed the cost of the intended use, or should the funds not be spent within a certain timeline designated by the donor. And then in regards to town approved projects, all town approved projects will be approved by council. It will either be done through the CIP process, because I anticipate that most of these projects will be capital improvement type projects. If there are items or a project that's not related to a CIP, it'll be like an operating type of situation. Again, it will still require council approval. And once that is established, the suggestion or the nomination of the project could be staff nominated. It could be committee nominated. And it could also be a situation where it happens outside of the budget cycle. Like, for example, the Shady Trail project that we did just a couple months ago. That did come up as an emergency type situation where the repair was needed. And we had 3 volunteers who were willing to donate. So that was kind of the process that, or the pilot that I used to create the template for the acceptance of donations. But the designated donations will be accepted by council. Undesignated donations will be accepted by staff or the town manager. And the resolution that I'm asking or recommending to be approved tonight will establish the gift and donation, the donation and gift acceptance policy, and also a resolution creating a special revenue fund for undesignated donations should those come up. This gives us some great flexibility in that we'll be able to address any issue or any question that comes up with donations, and there will be questions about donations. If there's just going to be some gray area or some criteria, or so I anticipate that the process for accepting donations is going to be refined as we go. But this policy, as it's written right now, lays a pretty good foundation in regards to accepting donations. So with that, that concludes our report and yield to questions. Oh.
So I forgot to put in there, one of the things we did talk about ahead of time was, based on Tony's experience, I will probably get somebody trying to put money in that's not for a specific project, that is generally. So our plan is to put that into this town council discretionary fund that you guys are setting up, that, well, what Tony has in this resolution. So there would be one project, if you will, that relates to that if somebody has an undesignated gift that they'd like to put in.
And then, as we discussed at the previous meeting, that fund in particular, as the principal grows, the interest will be transferred into the general fund for general operations. And then if it gets to a sufficient balance, council will have discretion to use the principal or to fund any type of project at its discretion. So, questions?
Oh, sorry. Let's try asking questions of either of the presenters at this point. Ellen, do you want to, would you mind starting?
Sure. So, excuse me. First of all, thank you, all of you, for what you guys are doing. I appreciate this model. It's a different model than what we usually see, and I appreciate it. So, having looked at what just happened with Atherton's motorcycle donation, what would we do in the case of an anonymous donation request? Do we have that thought through yet by any
And,
chance?
and can we have the fact pattern on
Oh,
a motorcycle
sorry.
donation?
So-
So that we have a point of reference.
Yep, Atherton, thank you. Atherton received an anonymous donation for 180,000 to cover the price of a police motorcycle. The Country Almanac did a PRA and found out who did it. They also looked at other donations that the town of Atherton has received. And the town of Atherton had received a few other type of anonymous donations, particularly from some corporate donors, which like, folks who, when you do corporate matching kind of things and such, which, I was surprised by, it wasn't quite as, personal as I was, but I'm just curious, if, like, in those cases, what your plans are, if you have any yet.
Well, from my experience, it's you honor the wishes of the donor. However, understanding that we are a public agency and we do say that donations are subject to public record requests. It's going to be a balancing act. But I think I'm going to lean more towards disclosure. But that'll be a conversation that we have with the town attorney and also with the donor as well. If the donor is comfortable with this being public information, then we will abide by the wishes of the donor as well.
Thank you.
So Helen, could I follow up on that before we leave that point?
Okay, well then.
But I-
And then I'll yield back to you.
Okay.
But
hang on.
I think it's going to be different if they make the anonymous donation to the PV fund, that they're not going to be, they're not held to the public. So we're just going to, we're going to be receiving it as a grant from the PV fund. So if we receive the anonymous donation directly, then we're going to have that dilemma. But if they receive it anonymously, then they're not obligated to disclose.
I was
Right.
just gonna add that particular point. If we get donations from a DAF, those actually can be designated as anonymous. So clearly, we wouldn't pass that information along, but you'll get a group, donation from Portola Valley Fund for stuff that comes through us.
So that was my follow-up. So you will honor an anonymous donation by keeping it anonymous?
Yes.
Back to Helen.
Okay, thank you. Other question, you said that people have specific areas of interest. Do you mind being more clear about what those areas are from what you've
Or,
heard?
I've talked with a number of people, literally it's been a year, I think, in terms of getting it organized. So people have made many suggestions about, oh, we'd love to do this or love to do that. Some examples, what are some good of the examples? The ever-present dog park, right? It was more of that's a complicated one in that it requires, you to designate land for it and that type of thing. So the capital cost is probably easy, but you have to make a lot of decisions first. I've heard that people might want to pay to upgrade the Zoom system, and that's one or two people. I have heard discussions about maybe funding some staff training dollars that to help attract new staff. Let's see, there was, the pickleball courts, right? Everybody knows they'd love to do more with the pickleball courts, that type of thing. So I've been a variety of things that people have suggested. Again, I'm going to come back to say I'm going to do we'll work on what the town thinks makes sense.
And the things you cited were mostly somewhat smaller capital improvement projects. Would the fund want to do something large, like work on the evacuation route,
So
fundraising for that?
So we have set up this, one of the things that I should have said was, in talking to people, setting it up so that it's a very, very generic was one of the goals. And there's nothing about the back end that wouldn't support doing that. I'd kind of like to start with a small one to work the bugs out. We still got to figure out how to transfer money the best ways so that it doesn't cost us anything. But there's no reason not to do something large with this. If the people want to support it and do it, then yes, let's, whenever I worked on the Portola Valley Schools Foundation, It was find a way, if some people want to give you money, try to find a ways to say yes.
Great, thank you. That's all my questions. Thank you.
Craig?
Thank you. Yeah, this sounds a little bit like a town GoFundMe project. So- Yeah, fair enough. Okay, so my first question, I think, is a little bit for both of you. For the staff time that's required for the project, is there some kind of cap on that? Will the staff time come out of the project fund itself? How do we manage the sort of the unobvious expenses, if you will?
Right. That will be the result of a discussion with the donor, if they're okay with us charging staff time.
Okay, and I think the question I'm asking is slightly larger, which is how is staff going to put a cap on the amount of time they spend working with the fund to try to figure something out? Like, take the dog park. That seemed like a great example. Like, there could be a ton of work that goes into figuring out if we're even going to do it. And I guess what I'm, want to make sure is that there's some way that the staff's thinking about how they're going to deal with staff time. And we can discuss this more in the discussion section, but I'm curious your thoughts on how we're going to basically control the amount of staff time that goes into any one project.
Right, my preference is to direct most of the donation towards the intended use. But also acknowledging that there is a cost with administering this project. But yeah, I would be open to capping at 5-10% towards the amount of the donation. It's usually, when you look at most grants, there's usually I know some grants can go up to 15%. But yeah, I'm good with 5 to 10%, but again, also would be in conversation with the donor if it's a direct donation. But we can work it out with the PV fund, with the grant. They can say up to 5% can be used for staff time.
Then I think my next question is addressed a little bit to you, John. Are you limiting the size of these projects? Because again, I can imagine we end up with these potentially extremely small projects, which the overhead sort of swamps potentially the value of the project. Like you say, there's
Am I
a,
limiting it? No. If you guys wanted to limit it, I'm okay with that. Again, I'm not gonna be out there proposing projects left and right to you. I'm looking for it to come the other direction.
got it.
So
Okay. Okay, great. What about appreciated stock? Can you donate appreciated stock into your? Because I can imagine that would be a fairly high value potentially to people.
I
I
have not-
realize it's tax deductible, but still, that's
I
sometimes.
have not looked into that.
Okay.
I bet I could figure it out, but I have not looked into that.
Okay.
Certainly if somebody. But sorry, I was just thinking of the whole, so DAF, somebody who has a DAF would probably have put that
Already
appreciated stock into the DAF.
DAF already, but
And then it would come to me, but if somebody wanted to try to make that work, I would be happy to work with them to try to figure it out.
okay, because I know that, there have been nonprofits in the past, you can just say, here's my stock, it goes to the broker, they sell it and gets deposited. So you might think about that. So then the next one, John, is you as well. I'm assuming that the refund policy, whatever it is per project. Like, we're not going to do it per donor. Right? Do you understand the distinction I'm trying to make? What I don't want is, I don't want Tony to say, oh, I got this pot of money for a project and there's 5 different sort of requests for overage refunds. Like, it seems like the project should have a general rule, like if there's extra money left over, it goes back to the donors in a uniform way, rather than somehow we have to manage 5, let's just say 100 people donate. And I'm exaggerating to make my point, but 100 different ways they want, some want it to the general fund and some want it put into some other fund and some want it somewhere else. Like, have you thought about doing it on a per project basis rather than on a per donor basis?
I'm not sure I totally followed your question on that. In terms of, what we've talked about in terms of refunds is if a project one doesn't make its goal, then we don't transfer the money to the town.
Okay.
Unless we individually check with the donors and say, well, is it okay to do it? Whatever.
it.
But the idea is we hit the goal, we transfer it.
Got it. Okay.
The financial system we have set up can give refunds, returns. We
Right.
can, that's automated.
Okay.
So,
you'll
but that
handle
would
that.
be,
That'll never
that
never
would be
get
our
to
problem
our
to
staff.
sort out, yeah.
Got it. Okay, okay.
Yeah, I mean, that's, having that infrastructure was part of the reason you get this set up so that it doesn't all flow through the town
Got
individually.
it. Okay, yeah, so that's, so then I guess the other half of that question is to you, Tony, which is if people are making direct contributions to the town, I would hope that we have a refund policy that's based on the project and not each individual donor putting money into it.
Well, as it's written, it's per donation.
Right, so.
And it's,
Okay.
part of the criteria of accepting the donation, that's all going to be worked out before we even accept the donation.
Okay. So then if you donate to the town, is it tax deductible or only if you go through this fund?
You can, donations to the fund are tax deductible,
Right.
donations to the town are tax deductible provided you don't receive a direct benefit,
Right, okay. And then.
like a quid pro quo.
Yeah, no, like I'm giving you money to do something for me.
Right.
I
Like,
got it,
yeah,
yeah,
here's 10,000, by the way, here's my housing project that I want you to,
Right.
yeah,
right.
that's not
Um,
gonna happen.
And then my last question, I think, is probably a combination of Tony and maybe Catherine, which is we gather some money, and this is particularly for Tony, not for you, John. We gather some money and then we, the council, alter the policy. But a certain amount of money was, brought in under one policy. Do we then have to potentially return it because our policy is no longer the same? Do we grandfather it? Like, I'm just trying to understand, because I mean, one thing I'm hearing from Tony is this is a little bit of work in progress. I mean, it seems like a great work in progress, but I can imagine that a year from now we go, okay, well, we've been doing it for a year and here are the things that didn't work out quite the way expected. If there's a material change, what happens to people who donated under one regime, so to speak?
Well, I'll start and Tony, feel free to jump in. So for designated donations, those have to be approved by council by resolution. And so that essentially does lock in the terms in that resolution. And if there were some sort of substantive change to the project, I could imagine that the donor and the town could work out the details of that and confirm that, the project should still go forward. And it's consistent with the donor's interest, that could be brought back to council. I mean, Tony, feel free to elaborate if you have different envision
mean,
how this might work.
As it's written and how I envision it, there is going to be constant communication between the town and the donor. And, we're going to iron out everything that we can before we even accept the donation. So we're going to try and cover all the possibilities that we can. And it may come to a point where we don't accept the donation because, it's too complicated.
Okay, great. Thank you. I mean, this.
Sorry, let me add a little.
Yeah,
so,
yeah, please.
I think when you think about it from the town perspective, if you're having an individual negotiation, those are going to should be big donations, right? You make it worth the town's time. I think we're not going to be doing individual discussions out of what we're doing, right? That's going to be smaller scale and it'll be, just do it that way.
And
So,
when you.
because I don't think we want to get into this whole having individual negotiations with each donor.
Sure, yeah, no, I agree. And I'm just curious, what do you guys think is a small donation versus a large donation? I mean, is, $10,000 big or small? Just for example,
In my bucket, I put 10K in the middle. It's a medium-sized donation.
that's why I picked.
You
it
get
up.
into hundreds, then it's a large one.
Okay.
Then after that, the smaller is small.
Great, thank you.
Great. Rebecca, do you have a question?
Yes, thank you for all the time you put into this. I think it'll be a huge benefit for the town. I did have a few practical questions. So Craig spoke about the staff time needed. I'm a little unclear on, so there's different staff time needed at different times in the project. So before the project even comes to us, you're going to be having discussions with, the champions of the project. And it would appear that many of the ones, the examples you gave are going to require probably our engineer to be involved before it even comes to us. So I'm just thinking what was it, the pickleball courts, or even there was a request for speed bumps, rubber speed bumps on Shawnee Pass to slow traffic down for the schools. I mean, that would be to me a small, easily achieved project, but it probably would require our new town engineer to kind of find out what the rules are and whatever that have. So that's even before the money has been collected, but so staff time will be involved there. And then any project that comes before us will require staff time for sure, because the staff's going to have to develop the proposal, essentially working with your champions and your team. So I'm a little unclear how and who will be making the decision to allow the staff time to occur before the town council has even approved the project. So that I'm a little unclear on that. Yeah. So what do you think how do you think that process should work?
It's going to mirror what we do for grant funding.
Which
Like
is,
with our transportation projects, they'll say, here's 100,000 for, let's just say the Beacons project. You know, there was no staff time allocated in the grant, and that was from the grantor. We've had other grants where, for our resurfacing projects, we received $200,000 from, the transit authority through Caltrans, but we could only apply $4,000 of staff time. So it's, we can't just say, hey, here's another way to shift salary costs to donations or grants. We have to use the bulk of the donation or the grant for the intended purpose. So I'm not looking at this as a way to, yes, we're going to reimburse some of our costs, but not all of them. This is part of what we do every day. So it's not going to be reimbursed by a donation or by a grant fully.
okay. And if people wanted to make a donation to the Affordable Housing Fund that already exists, is there an option to do that through the
Yes,
system?
we have special revenue funds for intended purposes. We have open space, we have affordable housing, we have park and lieu. Any donation can be received for those funds, and they'll be deposited into those funds.
And that would go directly to the town.
That'll go directly to the town,
Um,
and those will be tax deductible as well.
The CIP process, I mean, I haven't gone through it yet because I guess it's next time.
Right.
That's sort of a once a year thing, right?
Right.
For big projects.
But the policy does allow for, if something were to come up, a committee identifies something or staff identifies something, we can start the process again and bring it to council and say, we need to do this. Here's the scope. Here's how much it's going to cost. If you approve it, John, help us out.
And if a project gets approved by the town council, the champions go out there and raise the money after having consulted with staff in terms of what the estimated cost would be. They raise the money that's expected, hands it over to the town starts on the project, and oops, a new tariff war happened and the price of lumber went up through the roof, and all of a sudden the project cost doubled. How would the town, or how would this work with the system?
John?
I think that's one of the things where we said we probably need to work it out as we go. I mean, I think having caveat, a little bit on the fund, in the same way we're having a caveat on refunds, we could potentially have a caveat in that area too. We hadn't talked about that particular one, but I think we want to write something up as, what are we going to do, at least under the Portola Valley Fund on, if we don't make the goal, what are we going to do? Or we may have something where we say, would you like it to go to the town anyway? And that may be some individual conversations with people. But I do think there's little things we're going to be sorting out as we go. But that's a good question.
So the Portola Valley Fund will handle all the donation receipts for the money that you get, correct?
That is correct. It's actually pretty much automated.
But the undesignated and the direct donations come into the town, they would be handled by our town clerk? Is that how it's done? How it
The-
would be done?
The acknowledgements would probably come from my office. But,
Oh,
but I
okay.
mean, the actual filing and record keeping of the actual donation itself will be with the town clerk. But finance will have a copy of it because we have to record it in our system. But the actual official original document will be with the town clerk.
And you had mentioned that if we get a lot of undesignated money and it goes into this fund, and you said once it reaches a certain size, then town council would have the option. Is there an idea of what that size might be? Or is that to be determined?
That's going to be determined as we go along. I mean, because we may not receive a lot of undesignated donations, but in the event that we do, if it gets to a certain point that we need, or we need funding for a certain project, and the balance is sitting in this undesignated donation fund, then why let it sit? Let's use it and then continue with the process.
And one last question, can the town accept a $350 million plane?
I don't know if we can park it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mary? Rebecca, are you done? Okay, then Mary?
Okay, well, I think it's very exciting that you two are working at it so well together. How has that process been for both of you?
Great.
Right. So it feels workable.
No, I mean,
We-
we've had a couple meetings. There's a lot of collaboration. I was able to use my nonprofit experience to bring certain things to the equation that, they hadn't thought about,
Mhm.
and vice versa. So, but I think it's been a collaborative process. I think it's going to benefit the town. And I'm really looking forward to the fruits of this labor.
So there's not much duplication because I hadn't had John's experience. I mean, when I have given money to the town, there's been a mechanism to do it. And it felt like, okay, we're daylighting the creek. Okay, we're doing the town center. Okay, we're doing, and then it just, I mean, it's a not-for-profit. So it didn't feel like, to me, like necessarily we needed a second mechanism, but maybe just a better or more transparent. But I hear now something completely different. But let me just ask whether you have looked at the Woodside Community Foundation as something that's been doing this for about 10, 15 years, and also whether it helps. One of the things that they do is they look at the greater community.
Mhm.
So if there's a need for housing someplace, they will help out with that or whatever it is. So I'm just wondering if you can speak to the differences between those two mechanisms.
So I'm not totally familiar with the Woodside Foundation. Things I did look at were like booster clubs, the Schools Foundation that I was very familiar with. Most of those have like an ongoing campaign, and it's like an annual, and they raise money, and they have an endowment or an annual fund. So there's a purpose and a goal behind them, and I think that's the way Woodside is set up. This is different than its project. So
Okay.
we could expand. You're right. There is nothing about what we've set up that
Couldn't
isn't
be that.
expandable to something like that. And if we start getting all kinds of money coming in, I assume you would work with
With
us to make
us.
it happen.
So that means you don't have a goal for an endowment or
No.
a cushion. No, you're going to keep the checkbooks at zero if possible, as often
Yeah,
as
you have to
possible.
have like a minimum amount in the bank.
Yeah,
Type of
yeah,
thing. Yeah.
great.
But yeah, there's no plan to collect it.
And so maybe back to your presentation, the question of if we get a non-designated anonymous donor to the general fund, for general expenses, would it go directly into the general fund? Or would it have to go through, how would you see it moving through the system?
So this is undesignated or
Yeah,
designated?
undesignated.
Would go into the PV,
Which would, where would it go?
it would go into the PV Community Fund.
It would.
Yes, because it's undesignated. If they wanted to go into the general fund, then it becomes designated.
Got it.
Yeah.
I think, okay. Do you see it giving greater confidence to donors as a mechanism?
I believe so, having a formal policy in place, yes.
But having a separate organization,
Well,
separate 501c3.
well, they're only helping us with town-related projects. So this is just helping us to fund projects that are outside of the scope of our budget because we don't have the budget to fund these projects.
Right.
So, and it helps with, because we're receiving these as grants, so that it's not duplicate effort. Because like we don't have to then acknowledge the donation because it's coming to us in the form of a grant.
So, John, you wouldn't see it ever going out beyond what the town itself wants.
We have no intention of doing that.
It would be part of your bylaws that it would be restricted. You're gonna
I
have
think we've got that in the bylaws.
Yeah, so
Yeah,
you do-
yeah, no,
you
it's
have a-
definitely, it's town related.
town related.
Yeah.
Governance related, basically.
Yeah, and coming through
Governance.
the town requests,
Right.
not anything that we've set up
So that's
independently. or-
really different from
Yeah, you
Woodside
know, I
Foundation.
mean, one of the things we wanted to really avoid was, we've had some sort of factions in town and things like that, and we don't want to have anything to do with that.
Right.
Right.
And Mary, any other questions?
No, that's it.
Okay,
Thank
great.
you. It's great.
So thank you very much. I'll have more comments when we get to the discussion. I've got a couple of granular questions and then bigger picture questions. Some of the granular ones, looking at the language, types of donations, we're excluding alcohol. I'm assuming there's either, what's driving that? Is it legal or is it
It's
policy?
general fund, government, and alcohol, not a good mix. But
How-
there are
but
some.
How about marijuana, for example?
If, no, it would have to be purchased by the donor. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, I don't have a
It-
problem with the
it's-
exclusion. I'm
it's
just trying to
Just
understand
my
legally.
experience with working with the state agency as well. Alcohol is a big no-no.
Okay,
This opens the door to,
okay, so the only question I have for you to think about offline is that the only one? Are there other categories of donations that would be better kept aside? You don't have to answer it now, because I think you can
I-
address going forward.
yeah, I can't see anything else other than alcohol.
Okay. Okay, so then there is a little bit of line drawing that I'm confused about between when something's designated or not. So first of all, from a legal standpoint, there's a capital on page 38, there's a capital D designated donation. I didn't see a definition. And the reason that it matters is I'm trying to piece out when something's going to be designated for open space, for example, versus going into the general fund. Does designated mean accepted by the town for whatever purpose, or does designated mean going into a designated fund? I don't know if,
Designated means what the donor gives us a check, says, this is for open space. I'm designating this donation for open space. The designation is by the donor, not by the town.
okay, I would want that to be defined then or clarified. I'll put that aside and I'll raise it again later so that I'm not mixing questions, but there's one statement in here, anonymous gifts shall be delivered to the town manager for appropriate disposition. And I'm not quite sure how that fits with our discussion of anonymous donations, like that the fund can accept and ideally keep anonymous. But why, that almost implies that it goes to the manager, not the council. So I'm a little confused on what that statement is doing.
This is during the holidays, we receive food and other stuff. So like, it's basically comes to the town hall and it's given to staff.
Oh, that's the next one.
Yeah.
The one above it, and maybe they should be combined. Maybe it's the same topic and, D and E on page, 39.
I understand. Yeah, okay.
Cause the E, I kind of understood, an elected official can accept things of value by way of a gift if they're accepting it on behalf of the town. So that's the, here's a Christmas cake kind of
Mhm,
thing,
mhm.
example, right? But how is that if it is different than the anonymous gifts above?
Well, I think that might then go back to the previous conversation we had about anonymous donations.
Okay,
Um,
I'll just make a note to circle back on that one. Commentary. Okay, and then more conceptual questions. So you mentioned that the fund would prefer for these projects to arise out of staff, maybe the CIP process, committees, and the council.
Absolutely.
What is the purpose of the 501c3, John? How broad is it? Like in the papers, the official filing?
Oh, we are set up to take money for, it's like, category is like civil, support on that. Is that the question you're asking?
Mhm.
Or-
Yeah,
No,
it's
it's a
just-
per-
it's pretty flexible, but connected to Portola Valley. It's a segue off of Mary's question earlier about how broad or how overlapping with the town's interest the fund is.
So it was set up to be for the town support.
Okay.
Other than that, it's incredibly generic.
Okay. And then I think when you're determining the refund policy, so you're gonna go out, you'll start accepting money, looking good, but you don't reach the total. I assume you will do your job with those donors and work out whether
Yes.
it can still proceed or not. So then you'll turn around to the town and say, you didn't get 500K, you got 350, but people are good with that. Are you okay with it? And then we would never get it unless we said, yeah, 350 is okay. Okay.
Yeah.
And then after we accept it, Tony, if the funds are not fully used, there's room in a contract or some documents, either with the fund or with a arm's length donor that comes in outside the funds to adjust expectations. Either you have a written document saying if this happens then, or you just go back and open up a discussion about how you're gonna, is that roughly speaking what you
Yes.
envision?
Yeah, I mean, hopefully we would, before accepting the donation, the disposition conversation is had.
Okay.
And then the expectations are managed.
It's in the form.
Yes.
Catherine, I assume that you had a chance to look at any legal ramifications and you got comfortable that all this is workable and there's no material risk.
Agreed. And I would say this is based on other cities' donation policies. We've simplified some things given that we're a small town, but it is based on best practice.
Okay, that's great. And my last, I guess, question goes to, do we know what other jurisdictions do? Or Tony, you might, because you seem to have the background. You're going to hear a recurring theme of concern about staff time, and I know you can't predict that today. Some's going to require a lot, some projects, some aren't going to require much. Are there any controls, like practically speaking, from a different scenario that you can recall were useful? Because I'd hate to get into a situation where we get excited, want to refine a pickleball court.
Mhm.
And it's looking good, but then there's all kinds of ordinances and zoning and stuff like that. At some point, cost benefit isn't there. So how do you manage through that? Do you just take it practically and just say, okay, step one, let's see how much zoning is required or whatever it is?
Well, I think part of that is going to be, as we're developing the scope of the project, is determining how much staff time is going to be involved, what staff capacity is, and can we do this project within the time frame? And if we can't, then that's the situation where, as a town, where, we can't accept this donation right now because we don't have the bandwidth or the capacity to do this project maybe next year, maybe 2 years. So that's part of the process that we're gonna have to go through before we even accept the donation.
So you'll do that before you even put together a packet for council approval.
Right. By the time we bring it to council, it's gonna be, we can do this.
We can do this.
can do this,
Or
yeah.
you got to be aware of this
Right.
risk on staff
Right.
time.
Or it's council, we've got a number of projects, can we prioritize them?
Yeah.
And say, we're gonna do these 3 this year, and then these 2 next year, but still let the PV Community Fund know these projects are in the works.
Okay. All right, those were it. Oh, the last question, I guess some of the new tariffs and stuff, it falls into a force majeure, but I assume that you would just have a typical clause somewhere saying if the world blows up, discussions will be had, right? Like, you can't plan for everything. So I assume that the paperwork.
Yeah,
will fit.
I don't envision this to be a set it and forget it scenario.
Great. All right, unless there's any other questions, we'll go to public comment. I see no hands raised in the schoolhouse, so Rita Gomez.
Hi, thank you for taking my question. I was reading this in the packet the other day, and my question is, the resolution up for approval tonight on page 33 of the packet is for Portola Valley's donation policy, not for employing this business unless I missed something. The resolution does not seem to be attached to this particular business, Portola Valley Fund, other than in this presentation tonight during this meeting. Why this particular business? Are we interviewing any other potential companies tonight? This particular outside investment group, Portola Valley Fund, was there an open request to search for a fund management company to work or solicit money from residents with our town donation policy? Were there other companies considered? This company seems to have had lots of face time with our town staff that have so limited hours already. And how much is this group charging the town? Are they bonded? Are they insured for the money that they may hold from our residents? And I didn't see a contract in the packet. And with this company or any other company, who is going to be the gatekeeper? The town council, the town manager, or the finance director? I know I'm asking a lot of questions, and maybe this is something for Catherine or something for all of us to consider. But, with the issues that we have right now with our town finances, we really need to look at the contracts, but the resolution on page 33 does not include this particular business. It just includes signing off on the policy. So thank you for considering my comments.
Thanks. I'm gonna take other public comments first, and then we'll circle back and get some clarification. The next hand raised is Jane W.
Hello, Jane Wilson here. I just wanted to say thank you very much to John and his team for working on this. I think it's an ingenious idea to solve some of the financial issues that we're currently facing with the town management and finances. So I'd just like to thank him very much for all the work he's done, and I hope that the council approves it. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, I'm not seeing other hands raised online. Oh, Betsy M, please go.
Yes, thank you. I too, thank you very much, John and Sarah, for putting a lot of thought into this. I had a question about one of your points there that says that projects must be town approved before fundraising begins. I wasn't sure what town approved meant. And if you could, sorry about that, if you could make somewhat more clear to me, perhaps to others who share the interest, does the process spell out whether this will go before the committees? For instance, you were talking about speed bumps. If Betsy wants speed bumps in front of her house and I give the town plenty of money to achieve it, is that good enough, or does it go before BPTS, for instance? I can think of examples that are more controversial than that, but that would be a good one to start with. And whether this is a staff internal decision, whether it includes committees, whether it gets bumped up to the town council. I'm just not sure what that implied. So thank you for your work and for sweating some of these details that will make it smoother sailing along the way.
Thank you. All right, I don't see any other hands raised at this point. So I do think it is worth clarifying from a legal perspective, Catherine, the resolution. What exactly are we approving? How does the fund fit into a resolution? And are we supposed to be doing something separate or together with regard to the policy and the fund structure?
Yeah, so, and Tony, feel free to jump in, but the resolution just does two things. It would adopt the formal policy, and it would establish a special revenue fund. The special revenue fund, Tony, correct me if I'm wrong, but this is part of the town's,
Yeah, the town's
finances.
fund
It's like
structure,
we
yes.
have an open space fund and we have
Right.
housing fund, et cetera. So that there would be a special revenue fund for receipt of donations. That's all it does. So this is a generic policy, so it allows anyone to donate. And my understanding of why this was a joint presentation is that we probably wouldn't have invested the time to prepare this donation fund policy were it not for the interest of John and the board members to get this off the ground and to donate money. But it is generic and open to all potential donors.
And just to clarify, John, at one point, I think you said you're looking for approval, but I think you're looking for approval of the policy. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but that's what I think I heard. Is that right?
Yes, I would say that, yes. I mean, what it really comes down to is you're authorizing Tony to use me as a resource to help with the town, sort of like potentially any other resource he might utilize in the course of their job. So that's the way I look at it.
Great. And Tony, I think there was a perception that this may be exclusive or like one of one or one of two. How are you thinking about this? Say somebody else comes up with PV Fund 2 or 3.
If someone comes up with PV Fund 2 or PV Fund 3 and wants to do the same thing, we're not going to say no. The only reason John is the first one to come and say, this is what I want to do. I want to help the town. And so we thought this would be beneficial to the town. But if there's another nonprofit out there that wants to do the same thing, we're not going to say no.
And I'm hearing that it would not be standard to do quote an RFP or to do a general solicitation, that as these opportunities come up, however, you would be open and able to consider them.
If a nonprofit were to contact us directly, and we would have further discussions with them how it would work. And, you know, when you talk about like the Woodside Community Fund, Monterey County's got the Community Foundation of Monterey County, and they get their donations, they have their endowment funds, and then you apply to them for grants. This is how I see the PV Community Fund, or the PV Fund, excuse me, that they see the projects that we have and they're willing to go out and make or to raise the money to fund these projects, all we're doing is basically applying for a grant. And, and also to answer Betsy's question, only projects that are approved by council are considered town-approved projects. And a committee can bring a project to the council, staff can bring a project to the council, a staff member and committee working with the committee can bring a project to the council. So there's no governors here. If there's a need and the need needs to be filled, then we will address it through this process.
Okay. Do any council members have follow-on clarifications based on the public comment that they want to address? I'm not seeing a need, but, okay. Yeah, well, let's bring it back for discussion then.
Can I help respond to some of those though too? So,
Yeah.
Betsy asked about what I meant when I put on town approved. Basically, I turned that over to Tony. And it's like, whatever you think is appropriate, that's what we'll go with. Right. So it's not like I'm trying to designate anything there. The other question though, it's, there seemed to be some confusion. This is not a company. This is a nonprofit. There are no salaries. We're all volunteers. You know, I front-ended personally the cost to set things up and the ongoing operations. So there's no kind of contract associated with this.
Okay, that sounds great. Thank you. All right, bringing it
No
back.
cost to the town, correct? Yeah, yeah.
Bring it back for
Just the staff
discussion.
time.
I'm gonna start on that end. Mary, would you like to offer up your thoughts?
Well, yes, I actually have a few thoughts. There's so many things that the town needs to do or should be doing that we quote can't afford to do, like undergrounding high voltage wires and high-speed internet and things like that that are actually big ticket issues. How would they come to you? That would have to come out of, it would suddenly liberate. In what way would, it feels like this fund would suddenly liberate the committees to start thinking about actually solving some of our big problems. And what would they then at that point start to work with John directly, or would they
I
work
think
through the
Tony's Step
town?
one. I would think Tony's step one, but Tony.
But
do
I
you
mean, we're
wanna-
trying to avoid putting Tony right in the mix of things right from the beginning, but they could at least work it through.
How would you, I mean,
If
again,
it's
this is
a
supposed to be
really big
discussion.
ticket item, I would assume the town manager would be involved. But, you know, no one will be working directly with John unless the town says, yeah, for this project, they're fundraising for us. But other items, they need to work with either the committees, staff,
Okay,
town
so
manager, council. It's someone who is working for the town.
it may increase the staff time. I mean, there's
Well,
no
we
doubt about
don't
it,
kn- we
because when
don't-
we start thinking big, we start spending
but
staff
I,
time.
I don't think that should be a reason to limit.
Okay.
Can I also just address what you just said about undergrounding? I
Mhm.
would, gentle reminder that utility lines are owned by PG&E. And it is per mile approximately $5 to $6 million. And that was 3 or 4 years ago. So it's probably gone up to underground.
Mhm.
So just a gentle reminder that that's probably not a priority at this point. But It's
but-
good to dream big. but-
Maybe, it may be.
Okay,
Right.
but let's keep
Safe-
focused on this. The
But yes, I
question
wasn't
is
trying
a
to raise that up.
mechanism. Are we comfortable with the policy? Do we have discussion points on this as a mechanism? We're beyond the questions unless you really have a burning thing that you
Okay.
need to know to make the comment.
Well, I think it's fantastic. And so much so that I feel like we should have done it 5 years ago, the first time you mentioned it. I mean, it's a great idea. It's a necessity, and clarifying the whole giving process and having a way of saying thank you in a clearer fashion is very helpful.
All right, Rebecca? Comment?
Well, I think the policy is fabulous. I'm very appreciative of all the work that's been put into this. I also understand that it is a little bit work in progress because we don't really know how it's going to work in terms of what types of projects might come before the group. And so I do think that that we need to revisit it in a year, say, after it's been operating for a while, just to see if the process that are kind of defined in these guidelines, the policy, are actually working. It makes sense. I feel like part of the policy as it's written is not quite as detailed as I would love to see. But certainly without practical experience of accepting, finding a project, accepting a project, we don't really know what the best steps will be. So it's something that the policy will probably need to be revisited. I think the reality is that a lot of projects will bubble up from the community, and the people that obviously have the money are the people who are bubbling up projects. Like if I use my example, the speed bump on Shawnee Pass, those are families that suggested the policy, that they knocked on doors to see if there was interest among other families to kind of slow down traffic there. They're prepared to help make it happen. And so it's a little unclear based on the way this is written as to what their next step is. It sounds like they would come in and talk to Tony, I don't know, the town manager, a committee, they go to the BPTS. I mean, maybe that needs to be a little clarified about ideas that are coming up from the people who actually have the money, which would not be necessarily the committee members or the staff or the council members. I think it's a little cart before the horse for us for staff to come up with a project and then go out to the community to ask for the money. I think it's going to come the other direction because it's the people with the money that have the incentive to get the staff involved. So how that gets defined in the policy will probably need to be kind of massaged a little bit. Otherwise, I think it's a wonderful idea, and I think I'm very impressed with all that you've put in place in terms of collecting the money and how the private fund would work and that sort of thing. The other comment I have is for this general undesignated, not the general fund, the undesignated fund. I think I would like to see it just in the policy that we establish a number. If it gets to be this big, the money just moves over to the general fund. And then at the end of every fiscal year, automatically whatever's in there moves over to the general fund. I don't really want to see another fund just sort of accumulating money that has no purpose, because it's undesignated. I think it just needs to if we don't come up with a purpose for it and nobody proposes a purpose for it, it just needs to roll over into the general fund so that we close that out at the end of every year. Otherwise, and then I guess the other question everybody's kind of addressed or brought up was the whole staff time issue. And again, that will be based on the experience of some of the projects. We'll have a better sense of the process and how much staff time gets used. But at some point, I think there probably will need to be some limits of staff time before something actually comes to town council for approval. And then once town council, maybe staff will make an estimate of how much time they will need. And then it comes to council for approval of the project. And then it goes back to staff to actually more fully develop it, to come up with a number for what they need to raise. But there's just a little process involved. And I would hate to have projects come in to a staff and staff starts getting excited about it, and then too much time gets spent there when in the end town council decides it's not a priority. So I think there needs to be some type of limit, and who makes that limit, who makes that decision kind of needs to be determined. I would assume it would be the town manager, but probably needs to be included in the policy. If not tonight, but then in the massaging of the policy as it goes forward, as we start working with it within, the next year.
Just a comment, that was one of my thoughts, was that like a big institution like Stanford or whatever, research has overhead set charge. And is there a precedent for that in town management, that they have a set overhead fee for taking a grant? Because that is.
Mary, are you proposing to impose that now, or what are you doing with that? Because I think right now.
Well, it does make it a whole lot more attractive than going out for a grant for flashing beacons and then not being able to do it because you don't have the staff time.
So what's your proposal?
Well, I'm thinking that that's one of the flexibilities. I'm not proposing anything. I'm actually discussing.
Okay.
I'm discussing the idea that one of the appeals of John's mechanism is that you can include an overhead charge, potentially, so that it would alleviate that whole, because there is a precedent in institutions in general that they have a overhead charge when they accept a grant, and they do a 12% or 20% or some relatively large overhead fee. And
I get it.
that's
I
quite
understand what you're
appealing.
saying
That's-
now. Yeah.
That is the one thing that I say makes this different.
Okay. That's helpful. Thank you. Craig?
So first of all, thank you. I think this is fabulous. I think making donations easier is a good thing. So thank you for putting the effort into this, and I look forward to it. I want to be careful as we sort of move forward on this, that we leave enough flexibility in the system that, I don't want to, I just don't want to be too prescriptive. The couple of suggestions I have is, one, I think we should create a budget for staff time for this, that the town manager controls. Like, he can decide whether to spend staff time on this thing or this other thing, but that the council is going to say, this is the total amount of time, total amount of money you get to spend this year on staff time looking at projects that are coming in that may or may not go forward. Because that's my concern. Is, if they go forward, it's not a big deal. Then it's like, wow, we got a big donation and costs a little staff time. That's great. But if we start spending staff time on things and then they don't happen, then it's money not well spent. So I'd like to see some kind of budget from the finance director to basically cover that. And I presume you can make some kind of suggestion. Then my biggest concern on something that's large is cost overrun. Like, I'm hard pressed to understand how this works. We have a $100,000 project. John's fund raises $100,000. They hand it off to the town, and now it's a $140,000 project. And all of a sudden, somehow the town got stuck with $40,000, and we don't know that. We think it's still $100,000 when we take the money from John, and we even start the project. Is our plan to say, well, we spent $100,000 and it's not done, so we're going to just walk away from, it's going to be like the high-speed rail in Central Valley, or how are we going to deal with that? So I do have some concern because, construction overrun is a real thing. I mean, you have an architect on your board who understands construction, overruns well. So I would ask you to think about that. Again, because I want to leave you some flexibility, my proposal is that we review this in a year, that we not get too prescriptive right now and see how it goes, but that this sort of budget that belongs to the town manager kind of include these overruns, so that we as a council can say, look, this whole project isn't going to cost the town more than X to get this benefit. And I'm happy to let the town manager sort of navigate through that and say, well, we've only spent, a little bit of what we need so we can afford more. Wow, in the first quarter, we kind of spent all of it. Like, somebody's going to manage that. And I think that belongs to the town manager. The other thing for you, John, is I think you might consider in your fund, maybe a couple of sub-funds. One is one to cover staff time for your, projects that people are proposing, but it's sort of a separate fund that helps move the other projects forward. It's sort of meta, if you will. And then maybe another fund that can be applied to overruns. So, it's a thought that, you guys could have a couple of these, if you will, meta funds that you can say, oh, okay, we really want to see this project happen. We'll take money out of this overrun fund or this staff fund and apply it to this so that it happens. So then, yeah, so I think that's it. I think this is a great idea. I want to run it for a year and see how it goes. I just want to put a cap on the total cost so it doesn't turn into a runaway thing. And I only bring that up just because, our housing element was an example of a runaway project where we just consume consultants and staff time. And I'm not saying that this is anything like that, but I'm now completely sensitive to unexpected money just going out the door, like with nobody approving it. Like council never said, why don't you spend 1.2 million on the housing element? Like that never came up. It just sort of incrementally flowed out the door. So that's really what I'm trying to basically put a stop to. So town manager budget, I like the idea of any of the undesignated. I think after a year it should just roll over. I don't like the idea of a fund that just keeps building up. I think we should just say, we got a year and we'll put it in there. And if it helps other projects move forward, that's great. But, at the end of a year or maybe two, I mean, I'm not too particular, but at some point we just roll it over and move on. We don't spend a lot of time dealing with that stuff. So I think that's it. Like I said, a great project, and thank you. I mean, Tony, thanks for putting the base in place, which we're going to do tonight. And then John, thank you for setting up your 501c3 that can funnel money into this policy that we have.
Helen?
So echoing a lot of what my colleagues have said. First of all, thank you. Thank you. It's always easier to raise money if someone else is marketing for you, right? The town, that's not their job. So I appreciate what you guys have brought forward. I'm also a little bit worried. You spoke to the factions in town, and money can cause rifts, right? So I appreciate that you guys are going to try to be agnostic, right? So I appreciate that. In terms of the staff time, and I appreciate Vice Mayor Taylor's suggestion of Meta. I also, Meta accounts, I also would, as another Meta account, you might try to have some money to allow the town to be nimble when opportunities do arise, right? For instance, today, a PG&E microgrid grant appeared on my desk, right? And I would be like, for the towns, I know lots of us did not have power last week, right? And so, for resiliency, a microgrid might just be even for the emergency. But I don't think our town can even apply for it because of our bandwidth, right? So to create a Meta account that, like, when these opportunities do crop up for like a grant application, that maybe we could have some money to hire a grant writer for 3 weeks or something like that to even apply. But then you do need staff to manage these projects. So I appreciate that it would come back to council in, whether it's 12 months or 18 months to give it an on-ramp. Sometimes I feel like to get things off the ground, sometimes I don't feel like 12 months actually is enough time. So especially because we are towards, the end of our fiscal year, the Portola Valley's fiscal year. So 18 months to me makes more sense actually, to allow also holiday gifting type of end of the year. But otherwise, thank you. I absolutely think I appreciate it. And absolutely love that you guys are doing it and want it to move forward. Thank you.
We're very fortunate in this town to have people willing to do what you three and I'm sure many others have done, and to have Tony be thinking about how to make this work from a practical perspective. So we are all thankful to your efforts on our behalf. Many towns don't have that dedication present in the residents, and we do. And this is an extremely good example. I personally want to keep it simple for the first year. I could go with coming back in 18 months, letting it come off, get off the ground, get a couple of examples. And in terms of a cap on staff time, again, I do take Craig's point about we don't want this to escalate without monitoring. My suggestion to keep it simple is that some combination of the town manager and Tony have to come up with the right feasibility steps to come up with, unless you right now could say 20 hours max and then we're done. Like, I don't know that you can do that tonight, and I really want to get things rolling along. So I don't know, Mark, if you have a comment on you being designating the maximum staff time for a given project, and that can scale, but it needs to come back to council for discussion if it's going to be material. Would that be something workable to get out of the gate and started?
Yeah, I don't, anything specific at this point. I would need to chat with Tony about it.
Yeah.
I mean, if you actually take the idea of creating a budget for this, that would be in the budget.
For the
But,
actual project, I think what you're hearing is people
yeah, I
having
just,
the initial
I'll need to
scope out.
consult on this with
Yeah.
all the players before, otherwise it'd be speculation, and I don't think that's reasonable, but useful to you. I
Okay.
hear what you're saying.
But what I'm trying to solve for is, and it's a question for my council members here, is are we comfortable without a specific budget? Or if we need a specific budget, does it need to come back to us for what that is after that discussion happens? I'm not trying to preempt any necessary discussions, but I do want people to weigh in on that. How important is it to set that? And Tony, feel free.
The challenge is going to be, because part of our normal everyday is project development. I mean, we're going to be looking at a CIP budget, and part of our process is we have to review the projects.
Mhm.
So that's actually baked into what we do on a daily basis. What's going to happen with this CIP budget is we're going to identify projects that could be eligible for fundraising. But this is something that we do throughout the year, that if we've got grants, if we've got, so it's part of the job duties of staff that we have to look at projects and to develop it. So, and that's funded. So I don't know if I can parse out,
Right.
this amount of time for these projects. I mean, it's just what we do throughout the year.
So it's a soft request, not and this is for council discussion and consideration, but would you be comfortable with any material CIPs that come up through an organic process at some point, if you're really thinking there's significant unusual staff time that isn't factored into one of your budgets, that you come back and consult with us, or somehow it's socialized? Because what I'm looking for here is not being so prescriptive we can't get off the ground and running, but also be wary that in this year we're on fiscal constraints that we just have to deal with and recognize.
Right. And I mean, I could see it if it was an off-cycle project, something like Shady Trail.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that if something comes up and we have to address it, then yeah, I can say, okay, well, staff spent X amount of time on this project, which was outside of their normal scope of working.
Budgeting.
So yeah, we can define that via per project if it's off cycle, but like CIP, that's
Yeah.
what we're supposed to be doing.
So you're saying that would be part of what you're factoring in to a CIP budgeting process anyway?
the normal CIP process, no, because that's what we do. That's baked into what we do on a daily basis. If it's off cycle, so if it comes up outside of the budget process, then yeah, then I'll say, yeah, we spent X amount of hours developing this project because it was outside of our normal routine.
Okay. Just to finish off on this particular point, Craig, you have some ideas, I think, you want to.
So, I mean, what I had in mind is, I think when you come up with CIP projects and then John finds a way to fund them through his 501c3, that's our staff time, no problem. The ones I'm worried about is somebody from the outside, like speed bumps on Shawnee Pass, like that's not something that we're going to normally put on our CIP, but somebody wants to do it. Those are the projects that you could get sort of nickel and dimed. So, I mean, my proposal would be for that, in this upcoming budget that you're writing, is you just put a number in there that says, this is how much money, how much staff time we're willing to spend on projects that are being proposed from the outside for us to review. And you just pick a number, and then the town manager can manage to that budget. Whereas if it's CIP, it's something we need to do road improvement, or we need to do wildfire stuff. I'm fine with staff, our staff time, we pay for that because that's something we would do anyway. So I think that's the distinction I was trying to make. And I think we could pass the resolution tonight with you just adding something to the upcoming budget for the sort of incoming project review. And you can work with John, or you can work, with the town manager to decide, what that number is. And in a year, or, at the end of the next fiscal year, we can review this and decide, what the right way is.
So I'm still in the middle of my comments, but it might be helpful though, if anyone has any other overlay on that point, to hear it now so we could understand, and Tony can give us a reaction.
Yeah. My understanding of the CIP is that the CIP is supposed to be pretty much based on the priorities that we set a couple months ago for most of the projects, in addition to things like major road repair, or, or projects that capital improvement projects that have been on hold because of the budget issue. But I think a lot of the projects that are coming through, that will come through here, will be what you're saying, from outside the town, that are definitely not a priority for a town that's got a constrained budget. And so, yes, I feel like we kind of do need to, maybe not for the purpose of today to have an exact number, but I think as part of our resolution, we should add a little addendum that Tony will kind of develop, will add sort of a time limit for these outside projects that are not part of the priorities.
What do you mean, a staff time limit?
Staff time limit, yes.
Okay. Any other comments on that? Okay. So Tony, do you want to react to that, or give us some feedback on whether that's manageable? Because I think they're just asking for a ballpark that would in fact be used to come back to us and say, this one's bigger.
I think part of the initial assessment of if someone comes to us from the outside of staff committee, that it gets directed towards committee. So if it's speed bumps, traffic safety, and then traffic safety then can vet out the project and then bring it to council through staff. I think this is another opportunity for committee engagement as well.
Okay.
But the initial assessment from staff would be determining which appropriate staff member is going to be part of this process, and then what committee could we then send it to for vetting.
Okay, that works for me. Going forward, it's a framework, and that's all I think we can do tonight. In terms of Tony, do you have a viewpoint on the time period, whether we need tonight to say how long it sits there without moving to the general fund? I'm hesitant to be very granular this evening. And I do think that if this comes back in 18 months, we can refine certain aspects. So I personally would not think that needed, but I want you to weigh in.
I would say let's see what the balance is in 18 months. If it's $100, then donate it, but if it's a significant amount, then
Okay.
we can revisit that. But yeah, I think part of the process, yes, I understand there's more details that we need to flesh out, and we'll do that procedurally, not necessarily amending the policy, just as long as our procedure applies to, or is compliant with the policy. But the other item is, and I just lost my train of thought.
Well, for overrun, presumably you'd be covering that with the donor
Right.
as well.
Yeah,
right?
and again, this would be, again, to me, this policy forces engagement. And it's donor, committee, volunteer. I just, we have to have multiple points of engagement.
Right, that's all I have. So I think we're looking for a motion to approve the resolution, and what I'm hearing is a proposal to have it come back for a reassessment and an update on how it's going. I would say 18 months. Anyone want to make a friendly amendment to that?
Are you making a motion or are you asking for a motion?
I'm asking for
Okay,
a
so
motion,
I-
and that's one piece of the
Okay,
motion I would
so,
like to put
so
in
I'll,
there.
I'll make a motion. I would, for that piece that you just referred to, I would suggest we do it at the end of, and you might want to turn off your mics. Thank you. At the end of the next fiscal year. So it's not quite 18 months, but that would be right before we went into the next fiscal year and we could decide if we needed to tweak it. That seems like a logical time to me. And then I would like to, as part of this motion, in addition to approving the resolution, I would like to task Tony and the town manager to put a budget line item for staff time for non-town approved CIP project, or just non-town approved projects. And just pick a number. I mean, it can be like, we'll do $5,000 worth of staff time we're willing to put in. The council can decide whether that's appropriate. But just pick a number, and then the town manager can basically work against that budget.
Can you make it ad hoc projects? Because
Uh,
ultimately, the project will be approved by the council,
So what wording would you like?
like on projects on an ad hoc basis.
Okay, so for,
I wouldn't say non-town approved.
no,
because
that's
then
fine. For
that-
projects
yeah.
on an ad hoc, I'm trying to give you flexibility. In
Right.
other words, I'm trying to take it out of the CIP stuff, which
Right.
I'm happy to have you do with that. And it's just, somebody comes in with a harebrained idea and we go, well, I guess if they wanted to do it, it's okay, but I'm unwilling, and my concern here is if we have to start putting a lot of consultant time into it,
Right.
that all of a sudden that number could get, grow much. It's not like, oh, I answered a couple of phone calls. It's like, I just spent 20 grand. So that would be the proposal. And I trust that you'll bring us back a budget item. So we don't need to do that tonight. You'll just do a budget item. So that would be my motion.
I mean, I don't think it'll be a specific line item in the budget, but it'll be highlighted in the budget that included in staff time is X amount of hours dedicated to offsite or ad hoc projects.
I'm comfortable with that as long as when we do a mid-cycle budget review,
I'll
you
be-
can tell me that we're within the
Right.
range that we talked about. Thank you.
Could you just clarify on the timing of when you wanted this to come back? The end of next fiscal year? So
Yeah. Yeah, so like 13 months or so. And it seems like doing it right before when we're doing an analysis, I'd just like to look at this again. So it's not the 18 months, but, so it's going to be 12, 13 months. I mean, I'm going to trust the finance director to say, here's the impact that this program has had on our budget. Are you guys okay continuing, or do you want to rethink it? And I'd like to do that before we then go in, we've passed another budget, and then 3 months later we go, wow, we should have put more money in the budget for this or whatever. So that's what I was after.
I'm just thinking in terms of timing. Here we are going through the budget. We're going to get it not next week, but the 8th of June. And then we're going to pass the budget the end of June. And you're wanting to bring back at the same time this program to be reevaluated, by which time next year we should have already kind of passed the budget. So either we have to back it up a couple months, or we have to just push it to like October or something. So that's, I just feel like there's a lot that's going on in June and May, and I don't think
Well,
Tony's going to have time to actually do the assessment at that period. So I would prefer to push it to October personally, but because I don't, I mean, I think they'll give us some updates along the way. We're
Yeah.
going to have a sense of whether it needs to come back sooner.
So I will accept a friendly amendment that at least for this first time, that we just do it at the mid-cycle budget review. So that would be usually October-ish, Tony? When,
Mid-year's February.
it's mid-year February, then I'm okay with February. I mean, I'm I want to get it in so we have some thoughtfulness about how it's impacting our budget. So I would be okay with that. Are you okay if we just do it in February? Well, I mean,
18 months.
18 months roughly.
essentially.
I mean, you can give it.
I think that would be better, unless the program goes gangbusters, but yeah.
Well, if it does, we're not canceling it in February. We're reviewing it and saying, oh, it looks great, and we don't need to tweak it. Or Tony comes back and says, look, most things work, but
Okay.
here's what's not working. So that's the proposal.
So 18 months versus February, they're different. So is it 18 months from now, which
It's-
I would support?
Okay, so the friendly amendment that I was accepting was Tony's proposal. What do you call the mid-cycle? Give me a name for it.
Mid-year budget review
Okay.
is, there'll be one in February of 2026.
Yeah. So I was proposing that it happen before the mid-year budget review in 2026. And I would trust Tony to figure out what buffer he needs on
So
that.
that's less than 12 months.
Yes.
All right,
Well, it could go,
Tony, you're running the
I
show.
mean, I
so-
mean, just giving you an update.
so,
So,
all right, so let's,
And
why don't we
then-
make it the 2027? My goal was not to make it less. My goal was to make it slightly more.
Okay.
So is that, to be clear? So we're talking roughly February 2027.
Okay.
Okay, so that,
I
That's-
second it.
okay, thank you. We have second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, resolution passes. Do you-
Congratulations.
Hot seat? He is?
Okay, so we're going to take a 5-minute break, come back at 9 to continue the agenda. Thank you.
Did we complete that agenda item altogether, including John's presentation? Okay.
I am trying to get everyone back. Hello. Thank you all. My voice isn't up to much, so. Well, that's exactly what I'm trying to do. Okay. Christine, do we need to restart the recording? You did. Thank you. All right. So then the next item on our agenda is a report on the annual housing element progress for 2024. My understanding is that Terrence is going to provide an overview and some context. So Terrence, are you on? You're on mute right now. You are still on mute in case you're not aware. It looks like we're reaching out, so. Okay. Give them a minute. Terrence, can you hear us?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, if you could wait 1 minute, Terrence, for Mary to return to the room.
Of course.
Thank you. Terrence, we hear some background. I don't know if that's coming from you or not.
Still?
No, not allowed. Have your chance. Yeah. Okay, Terrence, I'm sure she'll be only another minute, so why don't you go ahead and get started? Thank you.
Certainly, Mayor and Town Council members. Each year, staff must make a report about the housing element implementation. It's referred to as the Annual Progress Report, or the APR. This is true of every jurisdiction in California. The report is generated by staff and sent by staff, but it is required to be presented to the council at a public meeting, and this is that meeting. As you can see from the staff report, there are a number of housing element programs that have been delayed due to extreme staff shortages. For much of 2024, planning building staff positions were unfilled, and the director position has been filled by a part-time planning and building director. We now have a functioning building department and a full-time associate planner, and recruitment for a full-time director is anticipated after a permanent town manager is selected. So we as part of this report, in addition to talking about where we stand on various programs, we report the total number of housing units that received a building permit in the calendar year. In this calendar year, 30 net units were created, all through ADUs or junior ADUs. It's worth noting that at that rate, that's just 1.5 units short of what would be required to meet our RHNA for the entire cycle. It would take about 32 units per annual to meet the RHNA. However, that's not the key issue. It is ironic that although unit production is not actually required by the state, we are required to report on the number of building permits that are issued. And just a slight refreshment, when it comes to ADUs, the state has developed a formula whereby 30% of the units are assumed to be very low income, 30% are assumed to be low income, 30% are presumed to be moderate income, and 10% are assumed to be market rate. This is the established formula that the state has brought forward. Again, in this calendar year, 30 units were issued building permits, and which compares to 22 in the year 2023. The 2023 numbers are for comparison only. Only the 2024 units are reported to the state. So with that, I'd be happy to take any comments or questions the town council or the community has on this required reporting to the state.
Thank you, Terrence. Let's go first with questions about the report, and we'll start. Craig, do you want to get us started?
So you might close your mic down, thanks. Just two quick questions. So the current RENA cycle started 2024, is that correct?
2023.
Okay, so the 2023 are counting as part of our total for this RENA cycle.
That is correct.
Okay, great. I just wanted to confirm, because when you said they were there for comparison. And then what are the consequences of us being behind on our housing element goals?
There aren't any consequences directly. If the state felt that we weren't providing the effort that we needed to do the programs, they could decertify us, but they can't do that to us because we're already decertified.
Okay, thank you.
But sorry for the flippant comment, but
no, I mean that seems like a legitimate, because I was gonna ask whether that they would follow up, but it sounds like they'll follow up by either certifying us or not certifying us in the near future.
Right. Well, I would add the reason some of these programs weren't developed as quickly as the housing element indicated is that we've really, with our limited staffing, we've focused on actually approving projects. The Stanford Portola Terrace project and the numerous ADU projects that are under construction. In addition, trying to get the Willow Commons project to completion. So we've prioritized actually getting housing built. So I would hope that the state would see that our direction, our energy is in the right direction. Just there are certain programs that we've fallen slightly behind on, but we can catch up with, as I said, with the staffing that I've indicated.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Rebecca, do you have questions rather?
Terrence, we exchanged some emails, but perhaps for the clarification of everyone, could you just describe the difference between the SFA and the SFD designation for unit types, since it's pretty critical? Thanks.
Sure. An SFD is a single family detached home. An SFA is a single family attached. In our case, a single family attached means a single family home with a junior ADU. A junior ADU means a unit within the main structure of the house.
And so attached means it could be just an attached ADU, it could be an internal ADU, or it could be a JADU. Is that correct?
It could be, well, if it's attached, it is a JADU. They're attached is equivalent to a JADU.
No, there's another designation of an attached ADU that can be bigger than 500 square feet, and that can include a bathroom and a kitchen. So there's definitely another designation. So are you saying that the ones that are labeled SFA are essentially JADUs in the table?
Well, no, they're attached ADUs. So you may be correct. All the same, it doesn't affect the number of units.
Okay. And then you sent out Christine sent out an updated report where the numbers changed a little tiny bit and our total units went from 31 to 30. So
yes, I just corrected a typo.
So what happened to the one? Because you provided a attachment that included 31.
The one is a single family detached unit that replaced a demolished unit. So it's not, it doesn't count as a net increase.
Okay, I get it. And then, so back on that kind of idea that if it's just replacing it, could you clarify the rules around when a house, when a house is demolished, what are the situations where it could be counted as a new arena versus it cannot be counted? I know they're quite complex.
Well, if a single family detached house is demolished and replaced with a house with an attached ADU, then that results in a net 1 increase.
Okay, but my understanding is that if it's a low income house, would that be the case? If it's a low income house that gets demolished and rebuilt as a low income house, that actually a jurisdiction could count that as a new ADU or a new house?
If the new house had a deed restriction, then yes, but we don't have any units like that in Portola Valley.
Okay, and then the table that you've given us is sort of partial. It's part of a much bigger table, I think. And this is where I'm a little confused about the whole SFA. We're indicating, we're only really recognizing the new attached ADU. Is that correct?
Correct. The report is to show the number of new units that are constructed.
Okay. Yeah, I think those are my questions. Thank you.
No problem.
Okay, Mary?
Wondering if I'm responding to Jim White's letter. Is that appropriate? If you could respond to some of the questions that were raised in that letter, including errors in the table, but I think you clarified that. I think I managed to figure out that from your discussion. So that's one thing, but the question of whether if you're home hardening, whether that somehow you could increase if you did a certain amount of remodeling, that would make a difference that would become another unit. Is there any credence to that?
That is not correct. So
Okay.
if you home harden, it doesn't, as far as HCD is concerned, does not add to the number of units.
And we are in sort of a special situation with being the only city that's been the second of 2 California cities that are pinpointed. What at this point do you think the likelihood of them litigating and doing a $600,000 a month fine would be?
I can't see as long as the town is making substantial progress forward and trying to address the issues, I can't see that happening. I don't have a crystal ball, but the town has been doing a lot of work to get the housing element in compliance. In addition, we've continued to prioritize actual housing production, which is what the state is ultimately asking for. So I probably shouldn't have conjectured, but that's my conjecture.
Okay. Well, I asked you to. Thank you for getting this done.
Okay. Helen, do you have questions?
I do. Thank you. Hi. So your numbers, when I look at the HCD website where the reporting is posted publicly, hcd.ca.gov, / planning and community development. Your numbers don't match what the town reported for 23. And so I'm a little bit confused. And it could just be, you know, how difference of reporting standards. But they have 13 permits submitted, one entitled, 19, and then submitted versus permitted versus entitled and completed. So, but permitted, they have for 19. And you have and that's for 23. Obviously 24 hasn't been reported yet. So that's a difference of 2 if you're counting permitted. So I'm a little bit, could you explain what your report is showing? It sounded like it was permitted, but why would we have that difference for, it's only 2, but you know, at this point, every single unit is really making a difference here.
Yes, the table that I've included in the staff report only talks about building permits issued, not about an entitled project that doesn't yet have a building permit.
I'm
Because
sorry.
that's the key determinant that the state uses to assess.
Terrence, you're breaking up.
Did I break up?
Yep. Could you maybe turn off your camera to answer the question for a minute, maybe for bandwidth
Absolutely.
or something? Sorry. Thank you. Try that.
Sure. It did show up. It said my system was low, so hopefully it's better now.
Okay. Thanks.
The building permits issued is the key determinant the state uses to indicate housing production. So that's my focus in the staff report.
So it is permitted for 23. You have 21 total
No,
units.
building permits,
Right.
not permitted. Could be a planning permit that hasn't yet issued a building permit. So for example, if we were talking about,
I mean, it clearly says on HCD's site, permitted means unit for which building permits for housing construction have been issued during the reporting.
okay, I apologize. So it's possible I made a mistake on the 2023 numbers then. However, we're not reporting those. We're only reporting 2024.
24. Okay. Okay. Let me look at my questions. Thank you. The demolished houses, we don't have a 50% limit here, right? To consider whether it's a new house or not. Is that accurate?
Correct. The demolished houses were completely demolished and replaced.
Okay. Should I also be asking questions at this point about the programs? This
Yes.
aspect?
Yeah, any questions?
Okay. In terms of the programming, I noticed that some of the items that are in our housing element are not part of the programs. Obviously, this is what the past council has adopted, and I'm still a newbie. But can we be adding programs that we think should be included tonight, for instance?
No, you cannot. We're only reporting on the housing element. If the town wanted to add programs, we would need to go through a process to modify the housing element.
No. I'm talking about programs like, for instance, in this report or that you've got listed, you don't have like the opt-in program, but it is in the housing element, right? So,
is your question why there are programs in the housing element that aren't listed in this chart?
Sure, if
Is
you want to
that-
phrase
I
it
don't-
that way. Sure.
Well, I'm not sure why these are the official programs. There may have been discussions of things like the sunset provisions and opt-in programs, but these are the official programs, all of them from the housing element.
I agree. I mean, all 3 of us are like,
Well, I think, but the opt-in program, if it helps, I think I recall the opt-in program being treated differently. we've had to move it around in terms of where it was, Catherine. I don't know if you recall, but it wasn't necessarily a program in and of itself. It was a pilot program, and we did it in a certain way, and then we had to back that out and put it in the housing element in a different form. And so my guess is if that's the only one that you noticed, Helen, there could be some history there that Terrence can follow up later on.
Sure.
If there are others, you might want to label them.
I'd have to look at our adopted housing element to find where that language lives and whether I agree with what the mayor said, is we did have to tinker with the wording and it might not actually be in one of the listed programs. My understanding is that this list is from our housing element. It's also the same, I assume the same list that we had last year.
That is correct.
Okay, I think I did look at the housing element. I think it was on page 133 or 138 that I found, the housing element does cite and I know that we've had iterations with the opt-in program, but I did want, I was surprised that it was not on as named program on here. Can I also ask the name of the program? 5.1 review municipal code standards and procedure documents. Is that for municipal code around housing specific municipal code? For instance, like our ADU code, for instance.
Yes, that program, that's a summary of the program, and it is it requires that we look at our municipal code and update it as necessary. So so for example, when the state changes a piece of legislation, we would periodically update that. And we were supposed to get that done by December of 2024 and then do it every 3 years. This actually mostly deals with building permits, I'm sorry, building code, if I remember.
I'm sorry, building code, you said?
The building code, code is on a 3-year cycle. So so that's what this refers to.
Got it. Right, because there's quite, Title 24, there's quite a change coming in the pipeline. Are we, is 5-1, would that be an area that we could look at to make it easier for people to potentially get permitted?
In this case, that's not what this program says. So this program is just about us keeping our building codes up to date.
Got it. I see what you're saying. Okay. Okay. Let me just look at my other questions here.
And I would just wanted to amend my answer earlier, which is that the opt-in program is listed as a program. It's program 1-3, Terrence. And I don't actually see that. We just sort of jumped from 1-2 to 1-3. So I'm wondering whether we actually might want to insert a row there to include 1-3.
Yes.
And my recollection was we didn't have to work on it right away, that we put it back some time. So maybe that's the other thing that's going on.
Yes.
That could be, but we can insert it and we can insert it and add. I can insert it and add to and add a description of where we're at with the process.
Can I add to that? There's quite a few missing, and it may be because the due date is not in this period.
Right. Well, let's hold that for when it comes back, because we're asked tonight to accept the report. So in the comment, maybe we can give Terrence some direction on how to do or what to follow up on.
Right. I was noticing that we were missing. So Great. So that's all my questions for the time being. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay. All right, so Terrence, in terms of the 2023 submission, you're not submitting that information in the formal report that goes to HCD at this point. Did I hear that correct?
That's correct. This report is only about what happened in calendar year 2024.
Okay. And can you give us a sense of what contributed to the uptick in the building permit issuance in 2024? Any trends or comments that you have?
I think just I think greater awareness by property owners that ADUs were possible, and greater familiarity with contractors in doing it. So I think people have just gotten used to it. That's my guess. We do have information on our website about ADUs, and we do prioritize in terms of giving early advice to ADU people seeking ADUs. So I'd like the town to take some credit for that increase. But I think the bulk of it's just property owners and contractors being more familiar with the process.
Okay, thank you. Right, that's all I had. So moving from the questions to taking public comment. We have a few hands online. We do not have anyone in the schoolhouse. So first is Ronnie Krasinski.
Hi. Yeah, I guess I had a question about the table of the housing units on page 56, and I guess following up on Rebecca's question about the SFA designation. Yeah, I guess, I mean, the answers seem confusing to me. Just looking at the table, there's a bunch of properties where there's both a SFA and an ADU. So just looking at one example, like 440 Cervantes Road, it has a SFA and an ADU in the table. And this, there was a ASCC review in 2024 for, you know, a new construction project at that address that had, you know, 4,000 plus foot single family home and the ADU. And so it seems a lot like the single family home is being classified here as SFA. And then it seems like the affordability being applied to it is very low income. You know, if that's the case, that just doesn't seem right. I mean, it seems like we're using the affordability categorization of ADUs to apply to those single family homes. So, I mean, I don't know if I'm misinterpreting something, but, you know, a bunch of these properties, I think, are just new construction with a single family home and an ADU. And I just wonder if they're being accounted for correctly. Thank you.
Okay, I'm gonna take other questions or comments from the public, and then we'll circle back and see what the council wants to clarify. Next is Karen Askey.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi. Oh, yeah. So my question on the chart, you know, well, I'm assuming that those single family homes have a JADU or, you know, an attached ADU in them. But obviously that needs clarification. But I didn't understand what in the unit category, there's some other categories there. One is MH and one says 2 to 4.5 plus. So I just was hoping we could get clarification on that. And then the other thing was, I was just curious, is the Willow Commons project is that in 2023 or 2024? And what about the Stanford Wedge projects, those larger projects? Where are those going to fall? Those are my questions. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm looking online for any other hands. Next is Christy C.
Yeah, thank you. I was just wondering about SB 9 lot splits, the number we're at now, and from previous meetings, it was 1 or 2. And if we could, since we're showing precedent for a few lot splits, that we could add that to use those units, since we have a precedent now and our housing element is not accepted yet or certified yet. Is it possible to use those units? That's my question.
Okay, thank you, Christy. I'm looking for any other hands up from the public. And I'm not seeing any. So we'll bring it back. And Terrence, there were a handful of questions there. One was the affordability calculation, looking at that larger chart.
Mhm.
On the SFA being very low income. Is that because of a formula? I mean, ADUs, I get there's a formula, but the SFA, can you clarify your thinking around that?
Absolutely. So the SFA means there's an attached ADU or a JADU, and it's the ADU that is counted as per the formula, not the single family home. So you take if you start with a single family home, a single building, and you build even a large new building that has a JADU, then that's considered an additional unit. It doesn't count the single family portion of it because there's a demolished house that nets out only the one additional unit. So that's why it's that way. The reason that you might see, and you do see, a ADU and an SFA is because the units are sorry. ADUs, standalone ADUs, are often built with a separate building permit because they don't necessarily, if they're meeting state standards, they don't necessarily go through any of our entitlement process. We're not allowed to even look at them in the entitlement process. Other question was in the top of the table, the MH and the 2-4.5. These are categories if we had them. If we had multifamily housing, MH stands for multifamily housing, and the 2 to 2.45 would be a small apartment type product. We during 2024 we didn't have any of those projects completed. When it came to how Willow Commons and Stanford are addressed, they would be Willow Commons was considered to be I'm not sure if it was in 2023 or in the previous element, but Willow Commons is not included in 2024 because it was neither entitled or issued a building permit or completed in 2024. However, it is very close to being completed. We're very excited about that. So it would show up as completed in 2025's report. The Stanford Portola Terrace project is similar in that although it was entitled in 2024, it was not. There's been no building permit issued. There have been building permits in process, but no building permits been issued. And then in addition, when it comes to lot splits, if there's a split lot, then and it's constructed, it is counted as an additional unit. So yes, they are counted if there are lot splits that occur. However, the lot split itself does not make a unit counted. A building permit would have to actually be issued.
Okay, thank you. All right, bringing it back to council for discussion. Again, we're not approving anything. We're accepting the presentation, and with that context, Mary, do you want to get us started?
I don't think I have anything to particularly add at the very moment.
Okay. Rebecca?
So my only comment is that the optics on the way this table's organized makes it very confusing for everyone. Because what people, when they first look at this and don't really understand what SFA stands for, they see that we have called a big fancy mansion on whatever street as a very low income, non-deed restricted unit. And there's no way that the media is going to understand that. So my question is a little bit about, is there an order that's required for these things to be listed? Or is there, can we list it in a slightly different order so that the ADUs are all listed first? The single ADUs are listed first, so that then that makes more sense the way the classification happens? Or are we required to do it by date or whatever?
There's also a question for Terrence there as to whether that chart is going to be included in the submission. So maybe you can comment on both of those.
The chart that shows the level of affordability of the particular units will go to HCD, and the answer is it is in fact just randomly assigned. But you can see I started at the top and moved down. So there's no particular rhyme or reason. It's applying the formula that the state has come to that looks at the units as being 30% very low, 30% low, and 30% moderate, and then 10% market rate. It's not for me to really look at to really comment on the logic of that, but that is the state rule, and that's how we're supposed to apply it. But in short answer to council member's question, we could move those around as long as the total stayed the same.
I would think from an optics standpoint, it would look better for us to just reassign the straight ADUs from the other direction, from the very low. And then in terms of future forward, I think it's very important that we have visibility on what's coming down the pike for next year and the following years. Because when I do a quick, calculation, we are at about 30% of this RHNA cycle 6, and we've, I don't know, made about 20% or something of the units. Well, this year, I guess, but I have to add the others as well. But it seems like we're currently a little behind on units, and then of course we're behind on the programs, but that we understand from the point of view of the staffing issues. So I think when you submit the report, it's mainly a bunch of tables. Is there further room is there some other place besides within the programs to provide a little bit more color as to our staffing challenges? Or is it just the comments that have been included on the status of program implementation?
It's the latter. I'm sorry, Mayor, if it's okay to answer the question.
Yeah, of course.
Okay. The other thing I would want to have done is I did go through the list of programs. So I really think we need to include all the ones that were left out. And I counted 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 10 were left out, and a number of them have dates that of course are after this year. So that may be part of the reason, but a few of them are not. And actually a couple of them are things that we've completed. So it would be really great to have them in the table showing that we did have a mixed use zoning, that we did create our objective standards, that sort of thing. So I think as part of accepting this report, I would recommend that we make sure we have all the programs that are in the housing element included, if it makes sense. If it's something that again is not due until 2026, then yeah, then it makes sense not to include it. That's it for my comment.
Right.
I don't have any comments. Thank you.
Helen?
So I am concerned about the clerical errors. So I hope that we can have some proofreading happening. I also would love a column for the public to understand like what's going, these questions about SFA, to have a legend somehow for people to for it to be easier for transparency reasons. You know, I will accept the, you know, the report tonight, but like in the future, you know, with it, hopefully with some amendments. I agree with, Councilmember Flynn that we need all of the programs, included, that we're missing 10, you know, it definitely, that's, you know, that's a lot. And also in terms of Willow Commons, I mean, my ADU's not listed on here, so, we need, you know, some, you know, somewhere the other things that are in the pipeline or that expect to be completed in 25 or something, some sort of other table additional with recognition of what, you know, what's coming in the pipeline. And then lastly, you know, in terms of that the town is trying to, you know, is trying to get housing built. But we are behind, and giving recognition to that, and, you know, and that the council wants to work on that issue and improve to meet the goals. I think that would be an important element as well. At least speaking for myself, I can't speak for my fellow council members, but so those are my comments. Thank you.
Okay, so I want to keep in mind that this report is a report, and it needs to include what it needs to include. So personally, I would ask Terrence to go back and look at the programs and make a determination why they were not included. I assume they weren't included in 2023 submission. If that's the case, why, and how can we figure out when and how to add others? Because I think right now, if we take an inconsistent approach with preparing a report, it can have unintended consequences. So I would want, before we add programs, for Terrence to, and I don't personally need him to come back to council for this, but to, maybe he can just casually report out what he found and what the criteria were. But I don't think we should be adding 10 programs if that's not appropriate to comply with the report and be consistent with the past. I don't know that we should be providing a preview for what's coming up, because this is a report for 2024, and I don't know that people reviewing this are going to be that interested in, we didn't do this, but we don't worry, we're going to catch up, or we want to. I mean, this is the report that responds to criteria that are set out there. That being said, if people want to take a look at programs and figure out how we can move things forward in an efficient manner, that's something the council can be free to do and discuss when that type of subject matter is agendized. Tonight is just, are we accepting the report, and do we have more direction for Terrence on how to follow up on some of these points? So I would rather not add more to the report than is needed to comply. But Terrence, can you give us some context, since you're hearing my thought process? Let me know if it makes sense, and if you've got a different view on how to think about preparing the final draft of this.
Well, first of all, I assumed that all the programs were in the list, so I will put them all in the list. Even if we're not supposed to do anything until 2030, I'll list them in the report. Second of all,
but Terrence, what's the downside of doing that? I don't want to just be throwing stuff and then doubling the size of the report if there could be a downside. If it's not, I'm fine with that, but I do want you to think strategically about what that might, any complications that might come up in a year that we're trying to, get through.
No, as long as they're official programs from our housing element, there's no downside. We can't add new ones. We can't come up with new ideas and without amending the housing element. But if they're in the program, they can be listed, and they shall. Okay. In addition, there's nothing to stop in terms of council's concern about expressing where we're going. I can certainly include a cover memo from me explaining to the reviewer what's going on. There's no place to put it in the report, but I can send a note to HCD. It's not a problem.
What would that say?
I would talk about frankly, we talked about this in the town manager and my discussion with the HCD director are the things we're doing to actually build housing and what we expect to be coming forward. So that I can easily write a text memo that's it's not included in the report because there's no place for that. But I can certainly explain where we're at and provide that context that if the council member is looking for.
Final discussion on what direction we want to provide the parents, and Catherine and Mark, if you think we're missing some guidance that we need to provide, let us know. But it sounds like adding all the programs won't be looked upon as unusual if we change the length of the report from 1 year to the next. And then a cover memo with context. I'm not sure the upside. I just want to make sure there's not a downside. Mary, go ahead.
Oh, I have two questions, one of which both of which are probably terrible. But at any rate, somehow starting the programs off with create a new gateway land use classification in the general plan. I know we've done that, but is that our opening, since as we just told them we didn't want to do that?
We still have to report on the progress of the adopted element.
Okay, so we have to do that, even though and then we very happily offer up that we're going to issue an RFP in January of 2026 on the Dorothy Ford Park. On 3-1, is that necessary, or can we
until we've changed the housing element, that we have to report on that progress, and we have to keep that as a goal.
Okay, and they want to see that. They want to see that we know about it or something.
Correct.
Okay, even though we do know about it. The other thing question I had at 2B was, what is the address of the new mixed-use zoning district? I'm sorry if I don't know. But you've had addresses elsewhere, and like in the 4394 Alpine, is it the same address? What address is that? Why do you have some places have an address and some places you don't have an address?
That's carried forward from the housing element and from the 23 report.
Okay, can you tell me what the address is for the new mixed-use zoning district?
Not off the top of my head. I will I'll make sure it's correct in the report.
He's going to check on that, Mary. So what else do you have?
Are these things necessary? Like this home sharing program? Is that something we actually that improves our status to put in there, or is it a filler, or is it?
It's a program.
beneficial?
We have to include the programs.
We have to do that one.
We can't cherry pick, from what I understand. Terrence, correct me if I'm.
No, that's accurate.
Okay.
It's a program, and the relative merit of those programs can be debated, but it is a program. We need to report on it. It's a very straightforward process. If it's a program, we have to say where we're at in this process.
Okay.
Okay. Any other comments or direction for Terrence? Do you have something?
Well, I have lots, but I guess
So what is do you have general categories, Mary, of them? Because there's very little of this that is changeable.
Right.
And we're not renegotiating the housing element tonight. That's an entirely separate process and discussion. We can have that in the future, but we're not having that tonight.
Perfect. Thank you. I got all my questions answered.
Thank you.
So the next step, my understanding, is that Terrence will complete the actual reports that HCD requires. that includes several tables, like the list of applications, the list that you've provided us of building permits, finished projects. There's a number of other tables, I think 4 or 5, that actually comprise the full report. What is the due date on this? And when will the council get a copy of the final report?
The due date was actually April 15th, but there's a grace period, so we have till the end of this month. And yes, you can get a copy of the report. I can probably best to email you a link once it's sent. It's quite the convoluted report.
But it's a publicly filed report, right, Terrence? So
Correct.
anybody can get it.
And last question, will it have the demolitions on it?
Yes.
Okay. Any other questions, comments? I'm not seeing any from Craig, Helen. Okay, so, oh, go ahead.
Sure. I do hope that you send it, the final report to the entire council, please.
Okay.
Of
All
course.
right. So in terms of formal procedure, do we need a motion to accept the report?
Yes.
Okay, may I have a motion?
So move.
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, motion passes. Thank you, Terrence.
Thank you. Good night.
All right, have a good evening. All right, so then we had included in the some liaison reports. If there are any other liaison reports people want to provide verbally, feel free to speak. Go ahead.
Can I
Okay.
just add a short thing about the search, which is
Yeah,
not
please.
exactly liaison? So I wanted to thank the town manager for the kind words at the beginning of the meeting. I know we have, difficult contract issues with the sheriff, but I did want to give a shout out to the Emergency Service Bureau for their support of this search. They supported 700 people that came in from as far as Shasta County and Yolo. I mean, we got a tremendous response to our request for help, and the sheriff supported us with food and logistics and all the other things that we needed. So again, I know we have a lot of issues with the sheriff, but I heard people going, oh, they're doing a terrible job, and they gave us great support. So I just wanted to add that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else?
I just wanted to, as the Cal Cities, the League of California Cities liaison, I think, mention that the Senate Appropriations Committee is meeting this week, and there's a couple of bills that the Cal Cities is either sponsored or feels strongly about it. And among them are the unwillingness of the housing, the way the housing element is being dealt with by HCD, and they have encouraged us as representatives to call these people and give their support. And you all got a link in your email today. So take a look and see what you think looked particularly interesting, but the planning and zoning housing element, regional housing needs allocation seemed rather appropriate. AB 650.
Thank you.
So I wanted to report out on the BPTS committee. First, thanks to staff and our new engineer for joining the committee for their meeting. For, a one weekend, we should give that man a bulletproof vest because he definitely took a lot of flack about the crosswalks, but he got the crosswalks across the finish line by the due date, which was due tomorrow. Which then enables the town to access future funds for other safety projects. So thank you to our new town engineer. I know he's not here tonight, but I also wanted to mention the meeting, partly, our chair was online. It was tricky for him and he had not noticed it in time to be the chair. But I don't know if there's any trainings for chairs to run meetings, because it's that committee, and I don't know if this is other committees, are a little bit chaotic. And it, so, okay, so, so I just wanted to, like, I think it would help, to understand, like, you know, like the process maybe, or something, but, so, you know, there's been a lot of confusion with the crosswalks. There was a lot of discussion on the forum. You know, the committee is like lost the grant, lost track of it. I'm not sure what happened. I wasn't the liaison, but it'd be nice. I don't know what else to do. Like to, you know, if we can have some training for the chairs, et cetera, or something. So I wanted to bring that up. I also did want to mention, moving on, just one other item that I will be working with staff to see if there is a way to apply for the PG&E money for microgrids to make, you know, to help make the town more resilient. And I'm not sure, it's not in, you know, it's not in anyone's prioritization, but to consider it, as we all regularly lose power. And this could particularly be a problem during emergencies. So a microgrid to elect, you know, to keep power for emergency services would be really helpful. So I wanted to mention that. Thank you.
Okay. Catherine, public comment on, I'm going to take public comment now on the liaison reports. There's no one in the schoolhouse raising their hand. I don't see anyone online raising their hand either. So at this point, I'll close public comment and bring it back for a motion to adjourn.
I move to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Hi.
We are adjourned. Thank you all.